I won't touch it. I promise.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Willow Bay.
And I'm Bill Ritter. Welcome to GMA Sunday on this week before Christmas.
So, movie lines wrapped around the corner.
Didn't see it.
Didn't see it. I didn't either. This weekend, the movie Titanic opened up.
Huge crowds.
Huge crowds.
Long movie.
And 8 Golden Globe nominations.
3 hours and 20 minutes. That's what I'm thinking. See, 8 Golden Globes. I think 3 hours and 20 minutes.
How about 3 minutes, 20 seconds? Because this morning we're going to hear about a true Titanic romance brought to us by Lori Hibbert.
That's all I get? 3 minutes and 20 seconds?
That's a long time in television, Lori.
It actually is. It's an eternity. Great romance found in letters that were discovered at the bottom of the ocean in a trunk that was traveling on the Titanic when it sunk. And it's a story of Pearl and Howard. Can't wait to tell you about it.
Nice love story.
Yeah, very.
We also happen to have, we scour the bottom of the oceans.
Exactly.
For things here. I'm going to put on my black gloves.
More than the letters that tell the story of the romance, there have been 5,000 artifacts that have been recovered from the wreckage of the Titanic over the past 10 years or so, and we're going to show you some of them.
Yeah, we have some. This is one. They're so delicate. Oh my gosh. Oh, no. No, that's not it. I'm only kidding. This is
funny.
it.
I couldn't wait to do that show. Can I tell you?
This is one of them. This is one of the coffee cups used on the Titanic. I can only touch it with gloves. I'm going to turn around a little bit. This is actually sea life growing on that. It's been under there for like more than 80 years. Did I get you nervous?
You did a little bit. They're fascinating.
Anyway, the guy who actually helped get these from the bottom of the ocean will be with us a little later and show us some more artifacts. They're really fascinating, really great stuff. Okay,
Careful,
I'm very careful. I'm very nervous now because I was...
Also, one of the most bizarre stories this week happened in Japan, where as you've probably heard, a popular cartoon triggered seizures and other side effects in nearly 800 children. So this morning we're going to talk to a doctor who will let us know just how much we should be worried about cartoons in our own kids.
Almost like strobe lights, and the photosensitive people can go into epileptic fits, and we're going to ask if it can happen here. It happened in Japan, 700, 800 people in a hospital. All that coming up, a big show for you, but first we're going to get caught up on the morning's news. And we begin with some good news in the war on drugs. After years on the rise, illegal drug use among teenagers appears to be leveling off. Now, a new government study found that drug use among 8th graders remained steady last year. And the number of 8th graders who say they disapprove of illegal drugs actually increased from 76% to 78%. That is the first increase of that question in 6 years. One negative note, there was apparently some drug use among high school seniors did increase. Now, President Clinton called the positive statistics a glimmer of hope.
Well, President Clinton reportedly will not include any plan to cut or simplify taxes in next year's budget. The Washington Post reports the president has decided to let Republicans put forth a plan instead. Why? Well, because any plan to balance the budget or to simplify taxes would probably require a tax increase for the middle class, something both parties are reluctant to do because next year is an election year. And Time magazine has announced its Man of the Year for 1997. It's Andrew Grove, the CEO of Intel, whose microprocessors run 90% of the world's computers. Time credits Grove with helping fuel the digital age and a new economy. Grove came to the U.S. as a penniless Holocaust survivor.
The family of Princess Diana reportedly plans to file a lawsuit against Mohammed Al-Fayed, whose son was killed in the car crash which killed Diana. Now, Al-Fayed owns the Ritz Hotel in Paris, and the driver of the car was a Ritz employee. The London Sunday Times reports the Spencer family plans to sue for at least $13 million. That is the amount of the inheritance tax on Diana's estate. It might sue for as much as $56 million, which would include the interest on her money if she had lived another 30 years. And a new development in the JonBenet Ramsey murder case in Colorado. Published reports say a stun gun may have been used in the 6-year-old's murder, and that police are asking neighbors if anyone owns one. Now, the Ramseys say they did not have a stun gun, which they say bolsters their innocence. It's amazing. It took a year to find that out.
Yeah. And a stun gun.
Great investigation out there.
Well, an early Christmas celebration in Bosnia. U.S. soldiers there handed out holiday presents to poor children near Tuzla. The U.S. troops can look for an early holiday visit themselves from President Clinton. President Clinton and his wife Hillary leave today for Bosnia. Also on the trip, former presidential candidate Robert Dole and his wife Elizabeth.
And speaking of the Doles, they took part in a Christmas tradition in this country before leaving for Bosnia. Yesterday, They read a famous newspaper editorial which responded to a young girl named Virginia. Her friends had told her there was no Santa Claus.
Virginia, your little friends are wrong. They have been affected by the skepticism of a skeptical age. They do not believe except they see. They think that nothing can be which is not comprehensible by their little minds.
The editorial was written exactly 100 years ago today.
Your private information, accessible on the internet. It's a story we covered a few weeks ago when we hired a detective who showed us just how easy it was to get all sorts of personal information about Bill. Well, this week, the computer industry, facing the threat of government regulation, announced a plan to limit access to private information. But it's up to individuals to request that their personal records be removed from databases. Joining us now from Washington is Evan Hendricks, editor of Privacy Times, a newsletter on information law. Good morning, Evan.
Good morning.
So, Evan, how will this plan work?
Well, we don't know if it will work, but the way it's supposed to work is that it puts the burden on individuals to find out that these services exist, so we hope that they see your show, and then notify them that they don't want their information in these sort of lookup services, so people they don't know can't be looking them up. It also gives you right to see your own information in some circumstances.
Tell me a little bit about these services. I mean, how many are there? Are they coordinated into one group?
Well, there's about 15 companies that have signed on to this agreement, and they involve the three major credit bureaus, which is Equifax, Experian TRW, and TransUnion. They supply a lot of the information to these companies, and then there's companies like Database America and WDIA, most companies that most people have never heard of, but they provide these reference services that a lot of lawyers and detectives and private investigators use when they're trying to find people.
So far, I mean, is what you're saying that if I want to get my name off of these things, I'm going to have to notify 14, 15 companies?
Well, they haven't. This only takes effect a year from now, and you have to understand these companies did not want legislation that would give us the rights as we deserve as Americans. So they did a preemptive strike, and so they bought themselves some time. And if they do the right thing, they will organize a way so you can just notify a clearinghouse, and the clearinghouse will notify to all 15 of these companies you don't want your information. But we don't know exactly how they're going to do it yet.
Yeah. So at this point, should consumers really be stepping up the pressure a little bit in order for the companies to make the process simpler for all of us?
Absolutely, and we're kind of off to a bad start because in the Federal Trade Commission report and in the report by the companies that signed this agreement, they forgot to list the addresses of these companies so you can start notifying them right away. And stepping up the pressure is exactly what is needed because this is sort of a civil rights type movement, and people are going to have to resist the uses of their personal information that they don't like, just the way people resisted segregation in the South.
Real quickly before we go, where do we get these addresses?
Well, I'm trying to get them myself, but I guess we have to go to the Federal Trade Commission and force them to put them up on a website or some easily accessible place. But you can also contact Privacy Times because we expect to have them within the next week or so.
All right, Evan Hendricks, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
They can
Not a
find
good sign
us.
if Evan can't find the addresses.
Right, and they can find us, but we can't find them.
Right.
Makes you kind of wonder. Okay, we're going to end our newscast on this note. It's about Superman's cape. Would you spend $17,000 to own it? Well, that's how much a Swedish businessman paid for the cape that was worn by Christopher Reeve in the original 1978 Superman film. The buyer was watching television yesterday morning in his New York hotel room when he heard about the auction, and he went down to Sotheby's faster than a speeding bullet, jumped in a cab, got there and placed the winning bid. He also bought, believe it or not, William Shatner's outfit that he wore in Star Trek The Revenge of Khan. He's paid $11,000 for that. I talked to him last night. Yeah, he's on a plane right now back to Sweden. I said, why did you spend $28,000 on this stuff? And he said he's a comic book freak. He loves Superman and he loves Star Trek.
And has a large disposable income.
Exactly right.
All right. Well, coming up, a young man's dying wish and his parents' remarkable efforts to make it come true.
And a cartoon put hundreds of kids in Japan in the hospital. Could the same thing happen to your child here? Time for your Sunday weather forecast. It's going to be dry in the northeast, sunny across the Great Lakes, and cloudy over the northern plains. Showers and thunderstorms will cover much of California, Arizona, and southern Nevada, with snow in the mountain areas of those states. The central Rockies will also see some snow. Rain and thunder showers will drench the southeast and eastern Gulf region. Highs today will range from the 20s in the northern Rockies, the northern Great Lakes, and New England to the low 80s in parts of Florida. Now, for more on your local weather forecast, check out After the Show, abcnews.com, on the World Wide Web, or on America Online. And GMA Sunday will be right back after this.
Good Morning America Sunday's weather report is brought to you by Publishers Clearinghouse.
Most kids spend at least part of the day glued to the television set, and while child development experts do disagree about the effect watching television may have on kids, the plus for parents has often been, at least we know where the kids are, safe at home. Safe, that is, until this week. In Japan, hundreds of children ended up in the hospital after suffering seizures while watching a cartoon on television. It's called Pokemon, or Pocket Monsters. It's a popular Japanese cartoon based on a video game. Now, the cartoons have been a harmless favorite with kids in Japan, at least until last Tuesday.
After watching TV, I didn't remember anything. I felt very nauseous and sick, and I had a headache. I was so shocked. My grandson had a convulsive fit. He was shaking, and his hands and feet are like this, and he was almost unconscious. My son's eyes rolled back, and he had a severe convulsive fit. I thought he was going to die, but then my husband gave him a heart massage, and he came to. I really thought he was going to die.
After watching last Tuesday's episode, nearly 800 children and teenagers were treated for symptoms ranging from headache and nausea to seizures. About 200 were admitted to hospitals, and as of Friday, 48 were still there. Doctors think rapidly flashing lights probably caused the problem. It's a technique that's popular in anime, the Japanese style of animation. The cartoons don't look like anything made in America.
You'll see the images and the movement and the pyrotechnics and the lights. I think the stories and the images demand of the audience more concentration. You sit and concentrate on a Japanese cartoon, which is so much happening, so much being thrown at you constantly, bang, 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 bang.
It is not the first time that kids, seizures, and flashing lights have been linked together. Video games have been blamed for causing convulsions. And for years, Nintendo videos have carried warnings about risks from flashing lights. But this is the first time there's been a problem associated with anime. So for now, Pocket Monster fans will have to be content with videos or stuffed animals. That's because the series has been taken off the air while the incident is under investigation. The Parents and Teachers Association of Japan is now calling for regulation of animated programs to prevent this from happening again. But it's not just parents in Japan who are concerned. Some of those cartoons also air on American television, and video stores in the U.S. carry them as well. So could it happen here? Well, for some answers, joining us now in Washington is Dr. Philip Sheridan. He is a neurologist and chief of the epilepsy branch of the National Institutes of Neurological Disorders and Stroke at the National Institutes of Health. Dr. Sheridan, thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Bill.
So the question is, can it happen in this country?
Well, it certainly is not unusual for an individual child to have this kind of reaction to a strobe light that you could see in a video game or on television. What was unusual was for it to happen with 700 children simultaneously.
Why do you think it happened?
That's unlikely to happen.
And why did it happen like that?
Well, the information I have is the same information that you all have through the news media. My guess would be that it was a matter of the kind of programming, perhaps the kind of high-resolution television that they have in Japan, and perhaps the custom of the children to sit very close to the set.
They also have bigger sets there, right? And they sit oftentimes in darker rooms than we do here in the United States, where we tend to have smaller television sets.
Well, if that's true, that would certainly help to explain the problem, because if you have a dark room and a bright strobe light, that certainly increases the intensity of the experience.
We have a clip, not from the episode that caused these seizures, but from another in the Monster series, the Pokemon Monster series. We want you to take a look at it while our audience take a look at it. I'm going to look at it on a big screen, much like the kids look at it. Now we see it here. What is that? What's happening right there?
Well, you're getting a very strong rhythmic impulse that could stimulate the visual cortex, with the result that the ongoing normal brain rhythms could be temporarily overrun by this, causing a lapse in consciousness. And that could occur either as a type of seizure, either a staring seizure or a convulsive seizure. It could also occur as a migraine-type phenomenon, with or without the headache,
Do we
with or
know,
without
doctor?
nausea.
Do we know, doctor, before we start viewing something like this, whether we're predisposed to it?
You may not. If there's a family history of migraine or family history of seizures, then that might mean that you have an increased sensitivity to it. What I'd like to emphasize is that if an episode like this occurs, in most cases it does not mean that the person has epilepsy. And the episode itself, although it's obviously frightening and disturbing, does not cause brain damage.
Okay, good tip from Dr. Phil Sheraton. Dr. Sheraton, thank you for joining us this morning.
Oh, you're certainly welcome.
Okay. Next up, a tearjerker romance from the Titanic. Willa?
Thanks, Bill. Coming up, Lori Hibbert will tell us the story. A real-life romance buried in the wreck of the Titanic.
Good Morning America Sunday is brought to you by the U.S. Postal Service.
The new movie, Titanic, is the most expensive movie ever made. It tells the story of one of history's best-known disasters, but it's also a very powerful love story starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet. Now, the love story is classic Hollywood fiction. Boy meets girl, he wins her over, fate intervenes, a doomed passion, the kind you only see in the movies, right? No, not exactly. Lori Hibbert has found a true romance that rivals it, right?
Indeed, a wonderful romance, and one that has some striking similarities to the one between Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio in the movie, and we'll talk about that a little later. But you know, long before fax machines and telephones and email, people really relied on letters as a strong form of communication, especially when they were long distances from each other. And it's through letters discovered at the bottom of the ocean that we finally get to hear the love story of Pearl and Howard.
November 2nd, 1910. Dear Howard, you say it all rests with me, what you have to look forward to, and your object in life would be a mere nothing if I, well, supposedly turned you down. Good night, big boy who has nothing. Your own Pearl.
The tragic love affair of Pearl and Howard was buried at sea for 81 years at the watery grave of the Titanic, until 1993, when 18 love letters were recovered.
You asked me if the love I had is dying out, and if it was only a passing fancy. I should say not.
In the early 1900s, Pearl Shuttle was a traveling vaudeville musician. She was in love with Howard Irwin, who was an upholstery maker taking a trip around the world. They kept in touch by writing letters. In 1993, Howard's trunk was found near the Titanic during a recovery expedition. Inside were all his belongings, along with the letters he'd received from Pearl.
From bedding sheets to playing cards to poems and personal diary comments. Howard became a real person again, and Pearl Shuttle became a real person.
October 1910. Dear Howard, I am so sorry I made you feel so blue. Isn't it funny how we say the meanest things to the people we like best? I could not be untrue if I wanted to.
Just 6 months ago in Erie, Pennsylvania, Barbara and David Shuttle happened to watch a tape of the documentary Titanic Untold Stories. A segment about retrieved letters and diaries caught their attention. Letters found aboard the Titanic had been signed by someone with the name Shuttle.
I kind of called him over, just absolutely screaming, and we went through the letter kind of frame by frame, and we found the references to Roy, which is Dave's grandfather, and then the reference to Pearl, which would be his great aunts. It just absolutely had to be his family.
That's how the Shuttles learned about their long-lost great-aunt Pearl.
We knew that Pearl existed even before the Titanic, but just knew her as a name, didn't know anything about her.
Good heavens, Howard, what is the matter with you? The year is up in April. During this time, I've gone out with a fellow to enjoy myself 2 nights, both I told you of.
He was tremendously insecure with the relationship, thinking that she would be out on the road, guys would be hitting on her, and a lot of her letters are reassuring him that she's being faithful.
No, I did not give them encouragement. If I had, I would have been married by this time. Why am I bothering to explain?
She was a really feisty broad. She really was. That's the only way I can describe her. She was very independent, very emotional.
Pearl's last letter was dated February 21st, 1911. No one knows what happened to her after that. We do know that she never married or had children. Researchers believe she died from typhoid fever in 1926. Howard's body has never been found, and no relatives have come forward. But a bittersweet romance that had been long buried 12,000 feet underwater has suddenly surfaced back to life.
What a wonderful story.
Yeah. Interesting similarity. Howard's name was not on the Titanic roster, even though his trunk was found at the bottom of the ocean. Now, in the movie, Leonardo DiCaprio's character, Jack, his name wasn't on the Titanic roster either, and it was because he had won his tickets in a card game about 10 minutes before it sailed. And we know that Howard was a bit of a gambler and stuff like that, so it could have happened that way.
Boy, great story.
Thank you.
Thank you. And up next, some real-life treasures from the Titanic. We'll be back.
We've asked Lori Hibbert to stick around. I interviewed George earlier, so this is George Tulloch, I should say.
Your company has been responsible for unearthing something like 5,000 artifacts from the wreckage site of the Titanic over the past 10 years or so?
The last 12 years, ever since discovery.
Now, you brought several of these artifacts. We showed one at the beginning of the show.
You sure did.
Put on gloves before we get to it. Why do you have to wear gloves?
Because the human oils, we don't want them to hurt the objects.
Okay, could you show us? We saw the cup already.
Sure, we saw the cup, and again, what we've got here, and you'll see this pattern in Captain Smith's hands in the movie. And this pattern used to be brown and turquoise, and with gold
hold
edging.
that steady.
And
Camera.
here, I'll hold it right
there. You go.
there.
Good.
And that piece, you can see how beautiful this piece was in the center. That White Star Line logo, unlike the cup, which this is the same logo, I might say, if they can bring it tight on that.
There you go. White Star Line.
That logo is now quite sad. This piece was from the Imperial Hotel in Malvern, England, which is in the west.
So someone had this on the boat with them?
This apparently was a souvenir of a passenger.
They took it.
And they brought it. Well, they might have.
Yes,
they might have. That might be the towel from the hotel.
Now, let me ask you, what are you doing with these? These are on display.
These objects.
You're not selling these.
No, in Lincoln Center at the Sony Theaters, for the public, while the movie is on, we're letting the folks see these over the weekends. But our exhibits in Hamburg, Germany, and our exhibits in St. Petersburg, Florida, at the Florida International Museum, are where the public gets a chance to see hundreds and hundreds of these objects.
And so your work is part historical preservation, but part education in some ways, right?
Absolutely. The concept of recovering is worthless if the conservators then don't make them available to share with the public, because that's the real value of these objects, is to relate the reality.
It was interesting, before we go into the other stuff, you said you wanted us to touch them, because that gives us a sense of history.
Yeah, because without that, there's no meaning to the objects.
Okay. We just have a few seconds left, George.
Okay, this object here is the great treasure of Titanic. This is paper. And in that sense, paper has never been given to us from shipwrecks before. This is a stock certificate that Franz Pohlbaum, another passenger, had. And this piece here...
Like the Titanic, George, we are out of time.
We're going to be sunk if we don't change.
All right.
John Pizzarelli Trio. They are playing music from their holiday CD, Let's Share Christmas, kind of sharing Christmas with us a little bit.
If that doesn't put you in the spirit, thank you, gentlemen. We're going to talk to you a little later. John Pizzarelli, Martin Pizzarelli, Ray Kennedy, you were with us before, and you're gracing us.
Familiar faces, we're glad you're here with us today.
If that doesn't put you in the Christmas spirit, I don't know what it will. You know, we just did the Titanic, and you know what he gave us?
Pieces of Titanic coal?
Pieces of Titanic coal. I can't touch these without my gloves either. Look at that. Can we get a close-up of that? Well, you can't really see it. Anyway, this is a part of the coal. Jinxed coal, I guess. Didn't do it much good, but
nevertheless a part of history.
Historic, yeah. Thank you, George, very much for getting us to Willow and I.
Also joining us today, George Chiccarone,
Hey.
to tell us the story of The Jester Has Lost His Jingle. More than just a children's book,
That's
right?
right.
Shot, George,
No, it's more than a children's book. Actually, it began as, well, a young man died way before his time, and this story revolves around a promise that his parents made to him before his death, obviously, and how they fulfilled that promise. It really is a promise fulfilled, and in a very big way, and it's delighting children all around the country.
Yes, we have it at home, and it's an inspiring book.
It's
and
nice.
to know that the young man who wrote it died soon after is truly inspiring.
Yeah, and the reason behind it and what was going through his head is really moving, and it's a nice story.
Okay.
We'll have that coming up.
Coming up, we're going to begin, though, with a news headline for you. A few new developments from Iraq this morning. Baghdad says it has finalized details with the United Nations for its oil for food deal. Now, it plans to start pumping limited oil for export as soon as it gets the okay from the UN Secretary General. Also, Baghdad is again threatening the United States. It warned it will not stand by idly if the U.S. keeps blocking efforts to lift economic sanctions against Baghdad.
Well, Iraq and Bosnia, two hotspots around the world this morning. And joining us now to talk about it is Cokie Roberts from Washington. Good morning, Cokie.
Good morning, Willow.
So, Cokie, how seriously at this point do we take those threats that Bill just mentioned?
Well, I think that the whole question of Iraq is a very serious one, and the idea that Iraq continues to just thumb its nose at the United States and the United Nations is something that cannot just be permanently ignored. We'll be talking about Iraq to the President's National Security Advisor, Sandy Berger, who will be here with us on This Week, and about Bosnia. The President, as you know, goes to Bosnia today. He will be talking to the troops there, wishing them happy holidays, but also telling them that their stay will be indefinite. He has now abrogated the deadline of next June, the second deadline that has been just ignored, and saying that now troops will stay for an indefinite period. That will be a big fight in Congress, you can be sure, and we will have some of that fight here on the broadcast.
You're sort of going to get in to some of the pros and cons. Now, the President really confronted this issue head on in some detail this week, and he basically suggested that this notion of deadline is not one that he's going to continue with, but that there should be some benchmarks that we reach before we pull troops out. What are they?
Well, there's the whole question of elections. Today, in fact, the Bosnian Serbs are going to the polls again because they're having a terrible time trying to have a free and fair election. And then there's the resettlement of people who were dislocated because of ethnic cleansing, and the much more difficult benchmark to measure, which is the restoration of some kind of multi-ethnic society rather than having the country permanently divided. These are all tough things, and as I say, it would be a fight in Congress. We'll be talking to Senator Joe Biden, who's going with the President to Bosnia, Senator James Inhofe, who's just returned from there, who thinks the troops should come home, and get a little taste of that debate.
All right. I know also, Cokie, you're smiling. You're going to get into this issue of love story.
That's right.
What in the world is all that hoopla about this week?
Well, the Vice President, in what appears to be an attempt to show that he's really kind of a regular guy, talked to reporters saying that he was the model for the novel and movie Love Story, and that Mrs. Gore was the model for the character Jennifer, who died in the story. And the author, Eric Siegel, has said, no, they weren't. And so now there's a whole Washington flap about, was the Vice President telling the truth? We'll have his chief media advisor, Bob Squire, for the first time talking about what the Vice President really meant when he said this.
Bill and I were sort of wondering if maybe there would be any dramatic readings from
that would
you
be good. You know, it's so teary, that book, that if you had dramatic readings, you'd probably then have to get new makeup.
Of course, Cokie, you know, what's interesting is that even if, I mean, it turns out he's maybe not telling the entire truth about whether he was the role model for that,
right.
But would he want to be the role model for Oliver Barrett IV?
Well, he clearly wants to be something that is more lively and interesting than the Al Gore that he has presented in the past. It's funny, though, because he has always really done a good job of making jokes about his own stiff image. You remember at the convention when he did the Macarena by blinking, and he always tells audiences that he's so dull that his Secret Service code name is Al Gore, but apparently he's trying to get away from that a little bit, and it's not working for him.
And he doesn't need this actually this year, given what's happened with the fundraising scandal.
That's certainly true.
And then you know what? After last week's advice to the president with your own dogs, maybe there might be an opportunity to advise the vice president on how to spice things up a bit.
Well, I'm not going to touch that.
By the way, very quickly,
dangerous territory.
Quickly, Koki, Sam told us his dog's name. Valentine, what's yours?
Abner. Abner is an old, very old basset hound who looks like an Abner.
I had a basset named Melvin one time.
Thank you, Bill.
All right.
There you go.
Koki's got a show to do. Koki, have a great show, and wishing you and Sam a happy holiday as well.
Thank you, same to you.
Right. See you next week. When GMA Sunday returns, the children's book that's keeping a young man's memory alive.
Did you cut me off?
Yes.
What's the name of that dog? Abner. Abner is the name of the dog.
Okay, moving along.
All right. If your child made a final wish before he died, you'd probably stop at nothing to make that wish come true, even if dozens of people told you it was impossible. That, in fact, is exactly how David Saltzman's parents responded when he made his last request, and George Chickerone has their really moving story of their efforts to make it happen.
Well, you know, this is the time of year where parents, as you well know, are scrambling to make those last-minute gifts and fulfill dreams. But for Barbara and Joe Saltzman, the gift that they're busy giving away this year began with a wish their youngest son made just before he died.
What I loved most about David was his laugh, his smile, and his hugs. They were just warm and wonderful.
David Saltzman always wanted to be a writer, a cartoonist.
He also hopes to start a career as an author and illustrator of children's books.
But David never had that chance. 8 months after his college graduation, David died of Hodgkin's disease. But while battling the cancer, he was inspired to write a touching children's story of a jester who set out to find laughter and happiness, and ironically found it hiding within the heart of a sick child.
Sometimes I feel like crying too, the jester whispered in her ear. We would not let the book die with David. We promised him that the book would be published and that it would be given free to children who most needed it, children who were diagnosed with cancer and had other special needs, who really needed to find their smiles.
After his death, his parents set out to fulfill their promises. Told by publishers it was too long and too costly to reproduce, they mortgaged their home and published the book themselves. 2 years after losing David, his book, The Jester Has Lost His Jingle, was finally published, true to their son's vision. But that's not the end of the story. Nope, not by a long shot. Something happened then that no one really expected. Apparently, David's words of hope and inspiration struck a tender nerve with America, and his book became a huge hit.
They looked far and wide. They looked everywhere that laughter might hide.
The book is now in about 2,000 schools and in its 5th printing with 300,000 copies in circulation. It also made several bestseller lists and has earned praise from educators who say its spirit and message hits home.
That there's laughter inside everybody and that you just need to let it out and let it flow.
You'll have an opportunity to make a difference, to give a message to the world. I know it sounds very grandiose, but that's what we're striving to do with our children.
When The Jester Has Lost His Jingle posted to the New York Times bestseller list, it had posted on David's birthday. We always felt there was some very special meaning in that.
You saved the day!
And true to their second promise, Barbara visits children's hospitals about twice a month to read her son's witty words of hope and hand out copies of the book. On this day, she was joined by baseball great Rod Carew, who knows all too well what it's like to search for laughter. He too lost his 18-year-old daughter Michelle to cancer.
With sadness, there's always happiness at the end of the rainbow.
We should all remember that.
Oh yes, I think we should. And that's what this story, I think, is all about.
Sometimes you just, need to look anywhere you can for something to smile about, and when you do, you hold on to it.
Barbara Saltzman finds comfort in knowing that David found strength within the whimsical character he created, and knows his words will live on to teach, enrich, and touch the hearts of children everywhere.
I turn my sadness upside down and stand it on its head.
When I get sad or lonesome, or when I get depressed, that's when I sing my loudest and dance my very best. That passage, to me, sums up what David was all about. This is a book you'll be reading to your grandchildren, and it's something that's going to last forever.
Now, keep in mind, no one is getting rich off this book quite yet. David's family is still about a couple $100,000 in debt, but they say at this point it really doesn't matter because they've already gotten their payback because literary scholars around the country are saying that this book is destined eventually to become a children's classic, and they're very proud.
Oh, what a great story, especially this time of year, if I can use that cliche.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting because their quest is exactly the quest of the jester, you know, to find the positive, to find meaning in
And it
life.
wasn't that easy because, as we said, they went to various publishers, which is what they didn't know anything about publishing, and they all came up with reasons. They wanted to make it black and white. They wanted to take the turn it into prose, take the rhyme out of it because they said it wasn't selling, but they wanted to be true to their son's vision, and they believed in it. And they're having the last laugh, and they're hoping David is looking down and smiling with them.
I'm sure he is. I love this book, and let me just read the last passage to you out of it. So when you're feeling lonely or sad or blue, remember where laughter's hiding. It's hiding inside of you. And this was written by a 23-year-old who knew he was dying. It's so sad and so moving.
Yes.
George, great story.
Thank you.
Great story. When GMA Sunday returns, the music of John Pizzarelli and his trio. We'll be right back. Really, really moving.
Nice people.
All right.
Well, critics have called 1997 a breakout year for John Pizzarelli. The son of legendary jazz guitarist Bucky Pizzarelli and his trio are having, we'd have to say, a great year. They had released a new CD, spent a couple months on Broadway, and they're appearing on GMA Sunday. Not the first, but the
second time.
Second time.
When were you here in June?
We were here, June.
Something like that?
Think so, yes.
Well, welcome back, John.
Well, it's nice to be back.
Happy holidays.
It's so long ago.
Want to introduce the guys?
Yes, this is Martin Pizzarelli on bass.
Any relation, John?
That's my brother.
Yeah, I figured, yeah.
And over there, Ray Kennedy.
Hi, Ray.
We're the Hanson of jazz.
Well, you know, Hanson was just here on Friday, so you must be feeling that
That's what
vibe.
all the squealing was outside the studio this morning. I mean, there's a horde of people shrieking and shrieking.
They're
It was
all
for
out
you
there.
guys.
Barricades are up this morning.
And you're gonna, no, it was not for me. Although I must say, let me just walk in front of you, John. There were several people who thought we were related. What do you think? Separated in birth? Sit close up. Not really. Well, maybe. I'm your older brother, obviously, but what, you're going to sing some Christmas stuff? This is from your Christmas album.
The Christmas CD, Let's Share Christmas.
Why not?
Yes.
And what are you going to sing for us?
We're going to sing Let It Snow Mbop. Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow.
Very good.
You got that right away, right?
I did.
Yeah, I didn't. I went out when you first went.
Stuff.
No, you're very sharp. Let me ask you something.
Yes.
When you released this, you said this album would sell for every Christmas in the future. Do you believe that?
Well, it better. Yes, I think it will. It's everybody wants a Christmas record. They, every year, new generations, they see records, they go, they buy. It's what they call in the business as a perennial.
Do you like performing Christmas music, though?
Yeah, it's fun.
You do?
That's, everybody likes it. The whole staff was singing along at the sound check and everything. Everybody knows the songs.
Oh, boy. They're not going to do that during the real performance, are you guys? No,
everybody keep it down, people.
All right, so the John Pizzarelli trio singing...
Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow.
In the bop version?
All three.
Right.
All right.
All right, here we go. Here we go.
We're together though the weather may keep us inside. We'll take it in stride by the fireside. Oh, the weather outside is frightful, but the fire is so delightful. Since we've no place to go, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. It doesn't show signs of stopping, and I brought some corn for popping. The lights are turned way down low. Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. When we finally kiss goodnight, how I'll hate going out in the storm. But if you'll only hold me tight, all the way home I'll be warm. The fire is slowly dying, and my dear, we're soon goodbye. But as long as you love me so, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. how I hate going out in the storm. But if you'll only hold me tight, all the way home I'll be warm. The fire is slowly dying, and my dear, we're soon goodbye. But as long as you love me so, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. I really can't stay.
Good Morning America Sunday is brought to you by Kmart.
You guys are pretty good. You ever think about going into the business?
We're working on. We need a drummer.
Actually, you know, you don't. It's a big trend now, right? Nat King Cole never had a drummer in his
That's
jazz
right.
band.
Oscar Peterson too.
And now the newer groups doesn't have one. What did we have last week? We had. Darn, I forgot. Diana Krall doesn't have a drummer either.
That's right. She's copying us. Yeah.
Oh, is that what it is? She spoke highly of you, though.
Right, I speak highly of her, too.
Okay, very good. A couple of program notes before we go. Later this morning on This Week with Cokie Roberts and Sam Donaldson, U.S. troops are spending the holidays in Bosnia and outside Iraq. What's being done to cool down these world hotspots? And tonight on World News Sunday, basic training in the armed forces. Does separating men and women work? Find out with a look inside the Marine Corps.
And here's Lisa McCree with a preview of Good Morning America.
This week on Good Morning America, it's going to be a Christmas to remember. Kevin Costner rides again in The Postman. Joel Siegel reviews the top 10 movies of the year. And Joan London comes home for the holidays. A special week on Good Morning America.
And just one more program note from Lori Hibbard.
Of all people, if you piqued your interest at all about the Titanic stuff we were talking about, the Discovery Channel is going to air 2 Titanic specials tonight starting at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, but I would check your local listings in your market.
And we have a little more Titanic for you, George.
Yes, we have a coin that was recovered. It's a 1912 British sovereign. And as you can see how new this coin is, this shows you how time was frozen at that moment that the ship sank, because this 1912 coin looks brand new.
Well, it was minted the same year it sunk, right?
It might have been the week before.
And the ocean water, all those years underwater, didn't hurt the coin?
Gold, being such a dense metal, is so safe.
Yeah.
It's really incredible.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot for joining us, George, and bringing all these artifacts in. It's hard to get. I know you're not easy to book.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's been wonderful being here.
Well, we really appreciate it.
And I hope the folks enjoy them.
And George Cicerone, a moving story about the Jester. Thanks a lot. Now, we wanted to talk about Christmases. Anybody have any Christmas tales to talk about?
Oh, boy. Lots of Christmas memories growing up. I was kind of in the Bronx, Westchester. They're all coming back to me. I remember going out and looking at Christmas lights when I was a kid. It was a big deal. That was my... Sorry.
Yeah.
That was it.
Another New Yorker.
Another New Yorker. Yep. In California, we didn't have those, wintry kind of Christmases, sun-drenched 78 degrees every Christmas.
Is everybody totally worn out at this time of year because it's so hectic?
I think so. I remember being a kid and being so excited, and I just don't have that energy and enthusiasm anymore. It's like
you don't have energy and enthusiasm?
No, but we have.
To some people, I don't.
We have all the excitement, and we have help from our friends back there, the John Pizzarelli
Will you play us off the air?
By all means.
What are you going to sing?
We're going to do Santa Claus is Near.
I like it.
You got it.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.
That special time is coming. The kids are on their best. The cold at times is numbing from the East Coast to the West. Snowflakes keep on falling as it's jingle bells I hear. Well, it's all be good like we know we should, for Santa Claus is near. Well, let's all get in the spirit by gathering round the fire. When the snow piles up, we'll clear it, but then we'll let it climb much higher. Or maybe a late night sleigh ride, it's the best night of the year. Or then we'll go to bed while overhead Santa Claus is near. Here comes Santa, always riding in his sleigh. Here comes Santa.
Good Morning America Sunday has been a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source. ABC News, now always on.
Keep a flashlight hand.